Well, good morning. My name is Will Glasgow. I'm the Director of Development here at Preservation Virginia, headquartered in Richmond. And we have, as always, our wonderful Preservation Field Services Manager, Sonia Ingram, with us. Sonia, how are things in Danville?
Good, very good.
Wonderful. And we are absolutely honored to have Dr. Angelita Reyes with us here to discuss the fantastic work of Literacy InterActives and the ParkerSydney Cabin Preservation Project here in Virginia. Dr. Reyes, good morning to you. Thank you so much for being here all the way from Arizona.
Good morning. I'm delighted to be here. I want to say thank you again for this. It's not for Literacy InterActives, but it's for all the work that we've been doing for communities in Southern Virginia, for all of the volunteers, all the people, all the officials involved, and all the families who I've brought in, who I've dragged in, who I've insisted to come in and help us. I also like to remember in memory of people who have passed on. Mrs. Hester was a vibrant, a fantastic member of the board of directors. She passed on 2 years ago. My sister, Bernice Cindia Reyes Akindeleje, I honor her. She has passed on. And also the Reverend Douglas Reynolds passed on several years ago. But we've had this wonderful group of people who believed in us and who have carried us on. So we're doing all of this in memory of them, but also for the who are here, the present, and the people I hope in the future nation will benefit from this project.
Sure. Well, they have a fantastic legacy through this work, especially Dr. Reyes. And I know it's been a tough couple years, but that legacy is certainly solidified, and we're grateful for the work that they've done to help share the story of the ParkerSydney Cabin and beyond. Do you feel like, have there been folks who've picked up the mantle and joined your ranks here in the last couple of years to help move things forward?
Oh, absolutely. I have one of them right here. Well, you, Sonia. I've known Sonia for quite a while, I would say, Sonia, when we would congregate at the Virginia Forum.
That's right.
And we were also communicating via email years ago, Sonia. Years ago. Yes, ma'am.
It's been great to know you.
Sonia, when did you first visit the cabin site?
Well, I visited the cabin for the first time last year when we went out. We had our annual board meeting, and we took a little field trip out there and saw the cabin. And that was the first time I'd actually seen the cabin. But
I was curious how y'all came together and got to know each other.
Well, we've been emailing.
Way before, say, Sonia, all your emails. Yes, really start meeting up at the Virginia Forum, right, Sonia?
That's right. We try to go to that every year, and I think that was the first time we met in person. And did you come to one of our conferences as well? I think in Charlottesville.
Yes, I did. And there was one outside of Richmond, in the little township outside of Richmond, and then in Danville. So before the pandemic, I was up and down the highways in Southern Virginia between Richmond and Mecklenburg and Halifax.
Well, and coming from Arizona, that's dedication, Dr. Reyes, that you would make all these trips out here, and we certainly are better for it. We do appreciate it. Well, and Dr. Reyes, you're a writer by trade initially, is that correct? That you studied literature?
Yes, and I'm Professor Emerita now at Arizona State University, meaning I'm no longer teaching, but I'm involved in the research. And for many years, I do want to also give a shout out to ASU, Arizona State University, for supporting me in this research. Because as you said, for the last 10 years, I've been back and forth between Arizona and Virginia on grants, on travel grants. And of course, my writing, my research has been part and parcel of my being a faculty member at Arizona State University. And we about 4 years ago, we received a generous grant from ASU to continue with our work, to have a staff person, graduate students, and so on. So
Okay,
yes,
that's fantastic.
it has been possible.
Well, yeah, actually,
Oh,
I studied creative writing, so kindred spirits, and I look forward to reading more of your work, because it's funny how sometimes writing does translate to history and telling these stories. It seems that the truth is stranger than fiction sometimes, right?
Absolutely.
well, Angelita, could you tell us a little bit about Parker Sydnor, like who he was, and a little bit about the cabin and the significance of the cabin?
Yes. Parker Sydnor, his full name was Patrick Robert Sydnor. In those days, Parker seems to have been a nickname for Patrick in many places, among communities, class, races, and so on. So he was basically known as Parker. And on official documents, he did have his full name written. Parker Sidney was born in 1854. He died in 1950. So he lived a long life, a long life. And he was born in Halifax in what they call the Forks, Forks, on a Sydnor plantation. But again, because of the logistics between the counties at that time, between Halifax and Mecklenburg, people were often back and forth. There wasn't the dam or the reservoir that has separated certain areas as it is now. In those days, you could just walk across and you'd be in the next county, or from our research, it seems that people would just take a rowboat and voila, you're on the other side. And the reservoir, as you may know, Sonia, it also affected how you would go into North Carolina, and then you would have to come back into Virginia in certain areas in order to get to that area of Virginia.
Yeah.
So he was Halifax and Mecklenburg. And after the Civil War in 1870, from the census records, he was at the Freedmen's School. He was away at school, and we were able to locate the school that he most likely went to. And also, he became literate. And this is one of the significant attributes or tools that he had was literacy, because enslaved people were not allowed to legally read and write. And so after the Civil War, he became literate, and he became a farmer. He owned land, but he also began to become a masonry. So he carved tombstones, what they called tombstones in those days. Now we would call them headstones, because we think of a tombstone as being something very big, very majestic. But again, keeping in mind this context, the historical circumstances, many African Americans did not have headstones in the cemeteries. And if they had wooden crucifix, of course, they would deteriorate. So Parker Sydnor began to carve the headstones, the cemetery headstones or tombstones. Now, the interesting thing is that because he was literate, he was able to write epitaphs on the headstones. And this is significant. And when we were able to have our nomination to the National Park Service, one of the criteria was that this is important because he was a tombstone maker. And in Virginia, there are very few documented literate African American tombstone makers. And so we connect him with the cabin where he lived in Mecklenburg County. And maybe even more significantly, Parker Sydnor is my great grandfather, who I never met.
So you have that family connection as well, which is wonderful, Dr. Reyes. And do we know where some of these tombstones are located, and the cemeteries are still here?
Yes, we do. I was able to document as many cemeteries in Mecklenburg County as I could. Now, I know of some in Halifax, but that was basically by default. He lived in Halifax. We know the churches that he was associated with, and we know from oral history that he did have tombstones there. And keeping in mind, many of these headstones, they have crumbled since the 19th century. But we do have a few that are still standing. And this is what I have based a lot of my research on.
Oh, wow. Do we know around how many he would have made during his career?
We don't have the exact number, but we do know the places and the location. And I don't want to jump ahead too much as far as the historical context, but in 1942, there was a fantastic article written on ParkerSydney for the Richmond Times-Dispatch. And because of that article, he began to get so much publicity about his making headstones in other counties and even among white Americans as well. And we have that documented in letters.
Oh, wow.
And we have the article, by the way, the 1942 article, and it's only because of the internet that we identified that that article, because so much is on the internet now. You know, digital humanities, digital technology. And I want to give a shout out to my brother, Glenn Edward Reyes, who identified the article.
Oh, well, yeah, it's wonderful having everything at our fingertips like that now, especially during the pandemic where it's harder to go in person and do research. So that's fantastic.
Do you think that he has any tombstones outside of Mecklenburg and Halifax? Do you think it's in any other counties?
Oh yes, Loudoun County. That was part that came out of the article that was in the Richmond Times Dispatch. There was a mayor in South Boston, and he knew of Parker Sydnor. And South Boston is in Halifax for some of our listeners. And during that time, this was right after World War II, the newspaper was doing a series of articles on odd fellow, people who were different. We did weird, according to the paper, weird things, odd things. And so in South Boston, the mayor said, well, we have an odd fellow here. He is a Negro, he's colored, using the terminology of the time, and he makes tombstones. And the newspaper, the Richmond Times-Dispatch, sent a reporter down to Halifax to interview Parker Sydnor. And of course, we have the photograph. And that's how that publicity enabled him, his work, to go outside of Halifax and Mecklenburg counties. And we have all of that document in letters from the mayor.
Wow, fantastic. Well, and it does seem like cemetery preservation is a big issue now more than ever, and it continues to increase in the amount of volunteers and initiatives taking place to see those cemeteries preserved. And certainly, we actually had a webinar not long ago, Dr. Reyes, talking about Loudoun County and the cemeteries there, the initiatives to preserve those. So it's interesting that all this connects in so many ways, and that in a way, there's nothing more sacred than a cemetery and the stories that tells. So it's just interesting to see how all this connects.
Yes, and in fact, in the article, and I have some quotes from that article from 1942, Parker Sydnor was very much aware of the importance of cemeteries. And he actually said, for so long, colored people have not been able to afford headstones. And now he wanted to memorialize the people who had passed on.
Right.
And there were people coming to him, asking him to do headstones for people who had been dead for 25, 50 years. But they wanted that memory. They wanted that memory. And he did it. And so when we look at a cemetery, it's biography, it's also this idea of the cultural legacy and the memory, the historical memory. Not only sacred, but also maybe secular in the intersection of the secular and the sacred.
Sure.
Mhm.
That's
Well,
a really good point.
um, I wanted to ask you a little bit about Literacy InterActives and how it was formed, and just tell us a little bit about the organization.
Yes, 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 yes. So I formed Literacy InterActives, a 501c3, to sponsor historic preservation. I was thinking at this time that I didn't want to have historic preservation to be the focus of this project, especially in this rural area. We know the status of historic preservation in many areas. People don't understand it, or they find that it's not relevant. So I wanted to have a platform that would connect ParkerSydney, that would connect African American history with the historic preservation. And I had this idea, this concept of literacy. Literacy is more than reading a book. There are many different literacies. We have financial literacy, health literacy, the literacy of culture, the literacy of, of knowing other people. And so these literacies intersect now. But one of the new literacies that we have would be the literacy of technology, computer literacy. Now, in some places, we have the digital divide. We have this division. We don't have the literacy there yet, but it's coming. So, with this concept of interactive literacies, the organization was founded, Literacy Interactive. And so, we're based primarily on intersecting the literacies of culture, public history, and digital technology. And I want to give you an example of digital technology. When George Floyd was killed in May of 2020, a young woman, Danella Fraser, used her cell phone as a video to record this incident, to document for almost 9 minutes what was happening. This is technology. And so this young woman presented this video, and this video just called out not only to the nation, but to all of the world to see what was going on. So now, coming back to this idea of technology, intersecting technology with culture, public history for social justice. We can't leave out social justice. Notice how social justice was also connected to what this young woman did in Minneapolis. Social justice and the impact, of course, that her video had. It wasn't the first time that such a video of police brutality has been used, but we're intersecting all of this with this need for social justice, with the pandemic that's surrounding us. And so all of those things are coming together for impact. Now, getting back to Literacy Interactives, we're in a pandemic now. I'm not able to be in Virginia physically, but we're doing things virtually. We're trying to keep people aware of our existence, especially in Southern Virginia. We have just donated um, a sizable amount of a contribution to the local food pantry in Clarksville. And we have a write up in the local newspaper and with the Chamber of Commerce. And so that's letting us know of our civic engagement that's connected to literacy. You know, people have to eat. These are difficult times. very difficult times. And we want to be a part of that civic engagement for our local communities and in the broader sense of connecting the need to help each other in our communities, to bridge our communities.
That's excellent.
Well, it certainly seems like history is unfolding before our eyes, and it's being documented more than ever before. We're not having to rely just on the written record. There are videos and recordings of so many things that are happening this year, especially. And it's interesting to spend so many years thinking of and talking about history, but now to be living it is certainly sobering and inspiring, and everything in between. So it's been quite the year to work in public history, Dr. Reyes, for sure.
It's
And I think,
challenging, yes.
well, it is, but I think from crisis comes opportunity, and it in a way has brought our staff together, and we're working sort of harder and more collaboratively than ever before. Ironically, even though we're all stuck at home a lot of the time, it seems like we're working closer and harder than ever to try to maintain relevancy and deliver. Fulfill needs of the communities that we serve in that sense. And a quick example, not to go off on a tangent, but a quick example for us is, we were thinking about all the kids who are doing virtual learning right now at home. Maybe we're used to coming to some of our historic sites on field trips and things like that, but that just wasn't a possibility this year. So could we do videos and webinars for students, and could we offer free Wi-Fi at our historic site? So if folks might not have access to internet at home, they could literally come to one of our museums and do their work there. So these are things that maybe wouldn't have been as much of a priority in years past, but now, as we've worked more creatively, I think we're fulfilling more of a need in our community. So in the long run, I hope it's all a good thing. But we were curious about the cabin itself, Dr. Reyes, and the research that you've done on that structure, and how you've documented it, and then through the digital technology, what's in store for sharing the physical structure itself with the world.
Yes, we're shovel ready. So I'm calling out to all of our people out there, our audience. We're shovel ready, and we're fundraising. We envision the site to be open to the public as a living public history center. It's a gathering place. It's a place to gather, a place to nurture, a place to know the past, a place to know the future, a place for communities to come together from all backgrounds and all races. And so that's what our vision is, and that's what we're striving for. We want to restore the cabin. At one time, the cabin had electricity. It didn't have running water. So our process is going to be more of a combination of rehabilitation and restoration. Not to put it back into the 19th century, because people lived there during the 20th century. Sydnor lived there. And I want to share with our viewers the fact that every summer when I was growing up, I used to go down to Virginia from New York City. And Maya Angelou has in her wonderful autobiography, I Know Why the Cage Bird Sings, this image of young children being sent back to the South during the summers to be grandparents. And I was among that cohort of young children being sent back to the South, even though I really didn't grow up there, but I knew the cultural landscape. And so certainly at one time, the log cabin, in my research, I documented the log cabin was a refuge for many families. And one of those families that it was a refuge for was my grandmother. And so I used to go there in the summer. There was electricity, no running water. And I know I used to dread having to go out to the outhouse at night. I don't remember walking there, but I always remember just the outhouse. And I hated going there at night. But during the day, it was fantastic. And I have written about this actually. We were children. We had fun. We were out in the fields picking berries all day. And I remember once we were supposed to get all these blueberries or blackberries or whatever it was for my grandmother to make a pie, and we're out all day eating them as we picked them, right? So by the time we got back home in late afternoon, we didn't have very many berries. And she was like,
You know, that's so interesting, Angelita. I just this morning was talking to a woman who lives in New Jersey. Her name is Elena Witten, and her great grandfather built the Shiloh School, which is a Rosenwald school in Mecklenburg County. And she was telling me the same type of stories about how for years she would go from New Jersey to Virginia in the summer and spend the summer with her family in Virginia, and how rich of an experience that was. And and this is someone who, she loves history, and she actually owns the school currently. So we've got to get you two in contact with each other, maybe.
I think I know where that school is. We'll talk about that. I think I know where it is. It's yeah, in Mecklenburg.
It is, yeah.
So, Sonia, you're going to go visit it soon, right?
Yeah, I planned on going tomorrow, but probably Friday. I'll go out there Friday.
So this was, in keeping in mind, the Great Migration is also a part of this history, the connection to the cabin, because as things got better for people, they left the cabin and they went north. The children were able to go to schools. I'm a professor now. And I've traveled the world, but it's an honor for me to be able to come back and be a part of this community that my ancestors were a part of. Really an honor. And I remember when I first started working on the cabin, my grandmother was gone, my mother was gone, my aunts, my uncles, and I was really afraid of being there by myself, of being in Clarksville, Sonia, of being in Mecklenburg County, because all the people that I'd grown up with, that I loved, that just were always comforting, that sheltered me, really sheltered me from segregation. I didn't really know about that growing up, even though it was in Mecklenburg County. But now all of that was gone, and I had to be there on my own. The interesting thing, of course, is that I did have relatives that I got to know, new relatives, if you will, that I got to know.
Well,
and they would travel with me. Yes.
This kind of gets to another question that we had about you and about yourself, and I think you've answered a lot of that. And I know you have a PhD, I think, in anthropology and literature, and maybe you've already answered this, but what, is there one thing that really got you interested in history, something that really spurred your interest? Is it this connection when you went back in the summers to Virginia, do you think?
Oh, yes. I liked your question, Will, about the aha moment. This was about 20 years ago. My mom had recently passed, and we had the property, the family had the property, and somebody had to go and deal with this cabin. And that somebody was me. Again, because as a professor at the university, I had my summers off. I was at the University of Minnesota at that time. So this is when I dreaded going back. I was afraid because of all the wonderful memories, the comforting memories that I had. So I went to the cabin site, and someone introduced me to someone, a local historian, and he wanted to see the cabin. And I remember what he said. He says, this could be on the National Register of Historic Places. That was the aha moment. I'm like, what? How? Why? What are you talking about? So I went back to Minnesota and I did some investigation, and that's how it started. So in actual fact, Will, for the first several years, I was commuting between Minnesota and Virginia.
Still pretty far though.
Yes, Minnesota and Virginia. And it was a labor of love during the research. Finally, in 2007, when we officially created Literacy InterActives, we had an inauguration of the presentation of our idea of the cabin to the community. We had a luncheon. And I like to tell stories. I've become that type of public historian. And we wanted a public luncheon, and we didn't think anybody would come. But we did host the luncheon, and people still love food, right? So we thought maybe 50 people would come, and 125 people showed up. It was like the story of the fishes and feeding the masses. We were able to do it. But one of the beautiful aspects of that particular moment was that it was very integrated. White farmers, African American farmers, people from town, there were young people. It was intergenerational, and it was bridging communities. And that's the relevancy of historic preservation, that it's not just the focus on the building or the site, but it's that focus on what are the stories, especially the vernacular stories that are connected to the site for people who were once marginalized, who were not included. Let's give them dignity. Let's celebrate this past, even as we had the difficulties. And this is what we did in 2007. And people came, and some people said, we've never broken bread together like this. And this people need to break bread. I love that metaphor of sitting down and eating together. Of course, is more difficult in this pandemic, but this is not going to be with us forever. But when we break bread, we have this idea of unity and equality, because when you come to the table, you're at the table together. You're not in the kitchen eating, you're at the table. And this is what we did when we had our inauguration of the log cabin for the community. And we let people know what we wanted to do. And as far as relevancy for historic preservation, we have always wanted to include, and we have included, the community. At our, just to say, at our annual board meetings, as you know, Sonia, before the pandemic, we would have, after the official business meeting, we would have an annual luncheon for invited members of the community, and we would have a speaker from the community. And so we knew that we would not get all of our funding at one time for the restoration and rehabilitation of the cabin. So are we going to just be quiet waiting for the money? No. We wanted to have relevant programming and relevant outreach to the community. And this is what we have successfully been doing. As I mentioned, the civic engagement with the food pantry, we have workshops, and we collaborate. We try to collaborate with other groups in the community.
And you work a lot with the local churches as well. Is that right?
Yes, 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 yes. Thank you for bringing that up. Every time I'm there in Virginia, I go to church. Some people say, well, you're supposed to go to church. Okay, well, I go to a different church every Sunday.
Oh, wow.
I go to a different church every Sunday. And the reason why I do that, because churches are still a major institution among Blacks and whites in this part of Virginia. I go to church to meet people, to hear the stories, again, to hear the stories, to know what's going on, and for people to find out who I am. And now, if I may say so, Sonia, people know my name. They can pronounce my name. Maybe 10 or 15 years ago, they couldn't pronounce my name, but now, and I used to introduce myself. I'm the daughter of Mrs. Cora Shields. I'm a Burwell. I'm a Sydnor, because those are the names from that area. But now they can pronounce Reyes, and some people, I still have some cousins who still call me Angela, and I'm not Angela, I'm not Angelina, but I answer to it. I'm so used to it now. I forget what my first name is. So the churches, yes, the churches play a very important role, and we want the pastors, the leadership in the various churches to know about us so that they can endorse what we're doing. And in
I
fact,
remember,
yes, Sonia, yes.
well, I remember you telling me that one time, and it really stuck with me. And I've used that in my own preservation work, that churches are so often the heart of the community. And if you can go to the churches and meet people and really engage them and tell them what you're doing, then you've won a big part of the battle, as far as preservation, but, everything, I think.
Absolutely. We're planting the seeds. I remember I went to one church. In fact, it was the church that my grandmother was a member of in Sydnor. And the minister asked me to come up to the pulpit. And I didn't know how significant that was until someone said, you have to be invited to the pulpit. Nobody goes up to that pulpit but the minister. I didn't know that. I didn't want to go up there because I was taken by surprise. The church was packed. And he wanted me to tell the people about the project. And so they were surprised. And let's face it, my accent, they weren't used to it, and everything was silent. And I'm like, oh gosh. And the minister, he was the only one who was doing the amens and, thank the Lord and praise God, because they were so surprised. But I did it. I did it.
Well, being a college professor, you're used to getting up and speaking in front of groups, right? So you could do it on the fly.
This was a new group, Will. This was a new group.
Well, I love what you said about the power of place, Dr. Reyes, that the idea that it's not just about the structures, but it brings so many people together to talk about this history and how the stories do interconnect and intertwine, and that, at the end of the day, it brings folks together. So that's wonderful. And so go ahead.
Go ahead. Yes.
And I was going to ask, is your daughter's involved as well, right? Hasn't she been helping?
Yes. Alexandria J. Reyes, Esquire. During all this time, she became a lawyer at Wake Forest University. And she travels from Minnesota to Virginia. And she has been a part of our nonprofit, a very productive part and very, very helpful. And I am just very thankful to have her involved in this project because she's the next generation, Will. She's going to carry this on. We're thinking now of the next generation, planting those seeds. Our children need to know about these histories. And I tell her the stories about her grandmother. Some of the stories are sad or difficult, and some things are funny. I just told her the other day that in our family for New Year's and Christmas, we loved eggnog. Like, who doesn't like eggnog, right? And there would be eggnog wars. Have you ever heard of an eggnog war?
Can't say I have. Wait, was it spiked or?
No. Who can make the best eggnog?
Okay.
Among the aunts and my mom and my grandmother, because we never bought it from the store. You always made it. So who made the best?
I've had that made. It is really, it's a whole different story than the store-bought stuff. It's so good.
Oh my gosh, yes. Do I know how to make eggnog? No. They did it. So now I would go to the store and just buy it, Sonia.
I don't know how to
make it. You don't have to tell your daughter that. You can just pour it in in a jar. She won't know. But that leads me to the idea of attracting the younger generation. And it's something that I think that museums and historical societies and preservationists have always sort of battled with and struggled with, is how do we be relevant to younger generations. But I feel like in the last couple of years, though, that there is a real organic interest with millennials and Gen Zers about the importance of history and the importance of place. And do you feel, or do you have any advice about how to attract younger folks to this kind of work and keep them engaged?
Yes, I think we need social media. As we know, social media is very important, and to meet them where they are. And again, getting back to the relevancy of stories and oral histories, we want to engage our younger generation. We want to invite them I invited her to be a part. I needed her expertise, but I also wanted to let her know this is part of her history. It's a part of it. And I think we need to really be aware of bringing in Gen Z, the younger, the millennials, to help be to advance historic preservation for its relevancy. Absolutely. And programming. What we would like to do when it's safe to go on the property, when we start doing some of the work, is to see if we could have establish it as a field trip, as a day trip for local schools, for local courses in Virginia history or local history. What happened here? That's the question. What about the farming? What about heritage farming? What did people grow? What is organic? What was considered natural back then is considered organic and expensive now, right?
Right.
So we want to involve the local schools, the teachers, to say this is a living history. This is living history. And the cabin and what happened there is nothing to be ashamed of. At one time, as we know, slavery was a very difficult subject for African Americans to deal with, to talk about. And now we understand that these people thrived, they survived, and we want to honor them. We refer to people as being enslaved because it was not their fault. They didn't have that choice. They were not the noun, but they were the adjectives.
Right.
And this is a part of our history. And oh, and I would like to say now when we talk about the cabin in ParkerSydney in that area, people are hearing the message. They go, oh yes, that cabin down the road. 20 years ago, it was, oh, that old cabin, it needs to be torn down. But that's not the tone now. It's the idea, oh, yes, we have a historical highway marker. We were able to get that 2 years ago, 2017, 3 years ago.
Which is such a big deal. That's fantastic. Yeah.
It is a big deal, Will. It was difficult to get. And yes, and I am thankful. I thank the NPS as well as the Department of Historic Resources for really being very meticulous about the application and why is there this significance. But we got it. We had Friday, Saturday, and Sunday celebrations in Mecklenburg, and it was just wonderful. It was really wonderful. People came. And we do have a video, by the way. If people just Google ParkerSydney video, that video will come up about the ceremony for the historic Virginia Highway marker.
Well, sure. And just really quick, Dr. Reyes, I was going to ask, there are plans for like an education center, or is the goal to create sort of a campus near the cabin for classroom purposes and things, or is it solely the restoration of the cabin, or what's sort of the next phase for?
Yes, yes. We have a master plan, an architect's master plan that was done by Virginia Tech. They came down, marvelous job, marvelous. And they presented us with a book. You know, we had our input for the concept, the future concept. And the future concept is to have a center there, a small center. The cabin would still be there. We have space for a parking lot. And we also have outdoor classrooms, what we call outdoor classrooms. So this center would be seasonally generated because of the size. It's not very large, but we want it as a living history center, a living public history center, intergenerational, a place to gather. That's when I mentioned earlier, a place to know the past, to nurture. It's a place to gather. We have in the design an outdoor theater for people to gather. And the site is not far from the Virginia Tobacco Trail, as well as the Civil Rights History Trail. So we're plugging in to those different compartments to also publicize what we envision. We really want people to come. It's not only heritage tourism, but it's also learning for all people. And I also want to say African American history is not just for African Americans, it's for all Americans. It's for all Americans.
Absolutely. And I think that, coming out of the pandemic, I think there's going to be a renewed interest in local historic sites like this, Dr. Reyes, and that the timing couldn't be better in a lot of ways in terms of connecting to those tourism trails and folks coming to visit. And it certainly is an inspiring project that I'm sure folks are going to get behind. So excited to see what comes next. And Sonia, I'm sorry, I think I interrupted you.
Well, now I think we've sort of jumped around on the questions a little bit.
Oh, that's my fault.
Yeah, no, I don't know if I think we've covered everything, but I just wanted to ask if there was any last things you wanted to say. But I mean, I love this project so much, and I love the organization. I think it's it's the community aspect of historic preservation. And that's really one of, if not the main goal of historic preservation, is improving our communities. Everything that we do, people just don't realize it, but we're doing it for neighborhoods and communities to better them. So, but do you have anything else to say, or did we miss any questions, Will?
I totally agree with you, Sonia. It seems that historic preservation is going into new dynamic directions. As you know, Sonia, you were at the 2020 Past Forward conference that was part of the National Trust for Historic Preservation. Very exciting conference. And one of the key themes, of course, was this idea of relevancy for social justice, impact. How does historic preservation become a part of the community with its relevancy? And I said, we're on target. Literacy InterActives is on target with that, because from the very beginning, this is what we wanted to do, bridge our community. And we wanted diversity already. We've always had a dynamic board of directors, always. But I've always wanted our board to be inclusive, to be diverse. And by that, I mean, as far as age, intergenerational, and also as far as African Americans and white Americans. We have a dear friend, I give her a shout out to Dr. Peter Bergstrom, who I know from the Virginia Forum. I've known him for years. And when I was looking for somebody, the word got around, oh, Angelita is looking for somebody white to be on the board. Now, I did not say that. But it got to Peter. And he says, I heard you were looking for a white man. You know. And Peter has become a dear. Peter and Kathy, they come to our board meetings every year. They're involved. They live in North Carolina. And I will say this unabashedly. When my sister died just 2 years ago, Peter and Kathy came to the funeral in Virginia, in Northern Virginia. And so when someone goes to the family member's funeral, that's a friend.
Right.
That's
For
a
sure.
friendship.
Especially traveling a distance. Yeah.
Yes. So they have become a part of our family. And I would like to say thank you to you, Sonia, and to our board members. We are a good group of people. We get along. We like each other. We respect each other. We're looking for, we do have openings on the board, but it's not just a matter of saying, I want to be on the board. As I said before, we want to bridge communities. We have board members with their different talents, with their different skills. We also want to maintain our diversity. And for us, of course, diversity is inclusive. Gender, intergenerational, race, background. You don't have to have any degrees. It's the enthusiasm And it's this idea of respecting other people in the community and beyond, of the beloved community, as Dr. Martin Luther King called this vision of unity, the beloved community. And our board members have always, I mean, I don't have to explain this to any of them. I don't have to explain that. They're on the board because they already believe in these principles of unity and working together. And we're just delighted to have Sonia to be a part of this mission and this vision.
And your board members, they're not just from that region. Do they represent geographically diverse as well? Are they from all over?
Well, my daughter Alexandria, because we share the same DNA, she has to be on the board. Okay. And most people are from Virginia. And the reason for that is because of our work in Virginia. And it was easier for people to come to our meetings and to our workshops and to the programs that we have in Virginia.
Sure.
In our bylaws, a person can attend the annual board meeting either by conference call or by Zoom, by Skype. So that's a part of technology, right? So how can we deny someone not attending the meeting in one of those? But we would prefer, we like it when we can get together. And over the years, we have been able to get together in person.
Sure.
So well, yes, most of the people are from Virginia, or in Virginia.
Well, and if folks want to get involved in your mission in the ParkerSydney Cabin project, Dr. Reyes, what's the best way to reach out and get in touch with you?
We have our website, literacyinteractives.org, and we also have the email address, which is very easy, info@literacyinteractives.org.
Fantastic. Well, I'm sure, I mean, again, this is a project that's inspiring and needed, and anything that we can do to help moving forward. But I'm sure that there's going to be donors and funders flocking to you because it's an inspired and wonderful thing.
I hope so. We hope so. Thank you so much.
Fundraising is often kind of the hardest part, but I know that y'all can do it. It's going to be fantastic. I'm so excited for the outdoor complex and
yes. We're excited about having this concept of outdoor classrooms and having a small amphitheater for storytelling, for people to gather, for the elderly people to come with the millennials and the younger people and to interact. And this is, again, for historic preservation.
Absolutely. Well,
thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Reyes. It's an absolute honor to have you here on this interview. I'm sure you're very busy. Are you teaching virtually or kids in class in person, but you're doing mostly research right now?
Yes, I'm doing research, but I'm doing everything virtually.
Sure.
I've stepped it up, Will. I've stepped it up. You know, I feel going to a Zoom conference for 4 days, hey, piece of cake.
That's the thing. It's like we're all doing double duty, and we were even talking that once things do, pandemic related, kind of get back to normal, and we're having more in-person programs again.
Yes,
we still want to do digital programs too. We want to do both going forward. So it's going to be kind of doubling up the work, but it's exciting.
Well, you probably already know that there's certain conferences or workshops we wouldn't be able to go to in person. Sure. But now, someone says, hey, can you join my class in Germany, in Berlin? And I'm like, sure, I can do that.
It's been incredible. The reach. We've had people attend our webinars from all over the world.
Yes.
But Dr. Reyes, thank you so much again for being here. We really appreciate it. We're honored.
My pleasure.